African countries, like other third world nations, was hit by COVID-19 pandemic, which has for almost 2 years crippled economic activities in many nations of the world. As countries begin to find their ways out of the economic woods, Nigeria is staging a remarkable comeback. How to sustain this growth to reflect in the lives of ordinary citizens and what other African countries can learn from the Nigerian experience are the main focus this week on the program. My name is Justin Bemunyan and I welcome you to Africa Weekly. For the first time in about 40 years, Nigeria recorded 5.1% GDP growth rate despite the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. This report will show the sectors that contributed to growth.
The analysis of the figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that the country's gross domestic product (GDP) maintained growth for 3 consecutive quarters. The last negative growth recorded was in the second quarter and third quarter of 2020. Factors identified as responsible for the growth are the gradual return of major commercial activities post-COVID-19 lockdown, as well as local and international traveling.
The economy is opening up. Businesses are reopening. Those who were under lockdown are getting back to work. But if you look at the growth year on year and exactly what was recorded, you will find out that we have not really gotten to where we are supposed to be. It's a gradual process. If you look at the baseline from where we are coming in 2020, that we are gradually opening up.
The aggregate GDP therefore stood at 39.123 trillion naira, higher than the second quarter of 2020, with aggregate GDP of 34.023 trillion naira. During the period under review, the non-oil sector contributed 92.58% to the nation's GDP, higher than 90.75% recorded in the first quarter of 2021. The growth was driven mainly by growth in trade, information and communication, transportation, electricity, agriculture, and manufacturing. The oil sector contributed 7.42% to total real GDP in second quarter of 2021, down from the figures recorded in the corresponding period of 2020.
Now joining us via Zoom is a development economist at the Samuel Adegboyega University, Ogwa, Edo State. He is Dr. Daniel Onyejiwa. He will be analyzing the COVID-19 and economic recovery in Africa using Nigeria as a peg. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Now, can you briefly give us your impression on the level of impact on Africa's economy by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's quite unfortunate that we are facing this challenge at this point in time, but the problem is not just in Nigeria, but globally, and the advent of COVID-19 pandemic has caused a lot and has affected the economy. Particularly in Nigeria, we seriously were affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. Looking at some microeconomic indices, it's so clear that we are just recovering, okay? Because before the COVID-19, that is before the COVID-19 breakout in March 2020, some of our indices were a little bit okay, talking about the inflation rate, growth rate, exchange rate, and the rest of them. They are practically okay. But after the COVID-19, we discovered that there's a downturn of the economy. You know, looking at the cyclical fluctuations, the trade cycles, they were downturn. So we are recessing due to the impact of COVID-19. Then we have the indices, you know, the exchange rate was depreciating. That's Nigeria depreciating against the dollar, and we had the all-time depreciation of 520 as of current value as of today. So the problem kept on going like a vicious circle of effect. Now we are trying to recover from the pandemic effect on generally on the economy. Well, it's a good thing, seeing the growth rate of 5%, but we must flash back. Where are we coming from? The growth rate is actually minus 6% during the COVID-19. So we are trying to recover gradually, 5%. Yeah, thank God. But people always forget to cast their mind what actually make up the GDP, the components of GDP. As an economist, as a development economist, GDP is the composition of consumption, that's private consumption, firm consumption in form of investment, then the government expenditure, and the net exports. These are what majorly composed GDP. Yeah. And GDP is a value measured in naira, and you can accept and believe my intuition that Nigerian domestic price is solely affected by the international foreign prices.
Okay.
In regard to foreign exchange.
As you've rightly said, many of the economies are gradually recovering, and you have mentioned the Nigeria's latest GDP growth rate of 5.1% is a case in point. So how impressed are you in this regard?
Well, I would say I'm a little bit impressed because it's a positive result, but I'm not overwhelming. It's not an overwhelming result because we are not coming from the level of the growth we expect. For example, Africa generally, we rely so much on international economists. Okay, so particularly in Nigeria, our import volume is so high. So anything that happens outside Nigeria send a feedback effect, like a shock on the economy. So we could have, have this huge growth if we actually have a sound economy. But we thank God because it's nobody's fault, but we believe that the present government is doing what they can do to fast track the growth indices in Nigeria.
Let's talk to economic managers right now directly. What should they be doing now to ensure that this growth rate is sustainable and meaningful in the lives of ordinary citizens?
Yeah, they should produce at the optimal level. There should not be any waste in the economy. That's the first thing. And they should make use of locally raw materials. They should reduce the over-reliance on foreign imported materials in their production because of the rates, the foreign exchange rate. And then the monetary sector should be able to reduce interest rate to a minimum of, let's say, single digit, so that investment could be encouraged.
All right. Now, before I let you go, Doctor, what can other African countries learn from the Nigerian experience, to fast-track the economic growth rate across the continent?
Like the current government is doing, is trying to encourage agriculture, and from there we can improve the GDP and reduce the over-reliance of the economy on foreign factors. And other African countries can, follow suit and, have this self-reliance, what we call self-sustaining economy. It's not only depending so much on other foreign economies or foreign markets. Let's build our productive capacity in such a way that we will encourage the indigenous companies to produce locally and increase our output level. That's the GNP.
Doctor, what will be your projection for the next quarter?
Well, my projection is I would like to Nigeria to look particularly on inflation rates, because that is the benchmark of any economy that wants to grow. The inflation is so growing at an alarming rate. If you cast your mind back, let's say 2020, the inflation is more than 2 digits, 12% down to 17%. And when you go to the local market, prices are going up. So let's work on the inflation and reduce the tendency of inflation in the domestic market. Then people will be encouraged to produce. And secondly, we should improve on our infrastructure and create more enabling environment in production, okay, into our local firms. They should be able to have this level of competition to play along with other competitors outside Nigeria. So we should reduce the cost of production by providing infrastructure, by providing good roads, lights and the rest of them, and to make the economy viable and friendly, to venture into.
Well, Dr. Daniel Onyejowa, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on economic recovery in Africa using Nigeria as a peg. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You're welcome.
All right. Now, the French government is in partnership with the African Union that will see the delivery of additional 10 million doses of vaccines to the continent.
A new partnership between the African Union and the French government is set to provide African Union member states with an additional 10 million doses of AstraZeneca and Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines over the next 3 months. The vaccines will be allocated and distributed by the initiative known as the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Trust, AVAT, and the COVAX Global Vaccine Initiative. The AVAT initiative was set up as a pooled procurement mechanism for the African Union member states to be able to buy enough vaccines for at least 50% of their needs, working closely with the COVAX initiative expected to provide the other 50% through donations.
The head of states have agreed on a common target that in order to get out of this pandemic, we should be able to vaccinate up to at least 60% of our population. And that will require that up to about 750 million people are vaccinated in the next 2 years in Africa. And that is the target we have set for ourselves. We are using all mechanisms at our disposition to try to reach a common target of at least 60% of immunization.
French President Emmanuel Macron has since the beginning of the pandemic been an advocate of Africa's need to have equitable access to vaccines and was the first leader to welcome and acknowledge the efforts of the African Union member states to build institutions like AVAT. He has met several times with the African Union's leadership and has also traveled to South Africa, where the French Development Agency, Propaco, is helping to expand Africa's largest vaccine manufacturing facility. France will also contribute to the WHO-supported hub, which will enable mRNA vaccines technology transfer to the African continent. The French government has also been a strong advocate of vaccine sharing in the fight against COVID-19 in order to accelerate global vaccination rates and ensure equitable access to safe and efficacious immunization against COVID-19. Through this new partnership with AVAT, the French government will advance its commitment of sharing at least 60 million vaccine doses before the end of 2021. President of South Africa and the African Union COVID-19 champion, Cyril Ramaphosa, said the French government's 10 million COVID-19 vaccine doses donation is a clear and welcome demonstration of human solidarity and political cooperation.
The Africa Development Bank, AFDB, and its partners are mobilizing $520 million to finance the first phase of the federal and state government agro-processing zones in Nigeria to increase productivity in the sector. At a high-level briefing session, Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, who hosted the meeting, reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to put in place enabling policies and incentives to attract private sector investment in the zones to ensure successful implementation. Participants, which include representatives of the African Development Bank Group, the International Fund for Agricultural Development (IFAD), and the Islamic Development Bank, provided progress updates on the scheme following their consultations with key stakeholders within the public and private sectors. The AFDB confirmed that it is in collaboration with other development partners mobilizing $520 million to co-finance the first phase of the program in Nigeria and implementation in phases across the 6 geopolitical zones. Director General of the African Development Bank's Nigeria Country Department, Lamin Barrow, said the zones would be rolled out in 18 African countries, including Nigeria. The Nigeria Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone program consists of 4 mutually reinforcing components: infrastructure development and agro-industrial hubs management, agriculture productivity and production, policy and institutional development, and program coordination and management. The federal government confirmed that all 36 states in Nigeria and the Federal Capital Territory would be eligible to participate in the SAPS program. In addition to the Federal Capital Territory and 7 states, Kaduna, Kano, Kwara, Imo, Cross River, Ogun, and Oyo participating in Phase 1, several other states have indicated interest in the SAPS program. These include Bauchi, Lagos, Niger, Jigawa, Ekiti, Lagos, Taraba, Benue, Sokoto, Ondo, Nasarawa, Gombe, and Kogi. Special Agro-Industrial Processing is a flagship initiative of the African Development Bank's Feed Africa strategic priority that aims at providing end-to-end solutions and services that de-risk production, processing, and marketing operations of private sector actors as they boost manufacturing and transformation capacity in production areas. Now to diplomatic issues, where Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari hosted the outgoing Tunisian ambassador to Nigeria, Jalel Trabelsi, where issues of improved cooperation between both nations were discussed.
Before his tour of duty as Tunisian ambassador to Nigeria lasting 5 years, Ambassador Jalil Trabelsi worked in the country as an officer for 5 years. President Muhammadu Buhari thanked the envoy for his genuine love for Nigeria and Nigerians. He assured him that he can count on Nigeria's goodwill for himself, his family, and indeed his country. As the president puts it during the closed-door engagement, "You have identified with us so much, and I wish you a successful tour wherever you are posted to next." The outgoing ambassador had told the president that he insisted on waiting till he had an audience with him before leaving so that he could personally express gratitude to a man he admired and to a people he loved. He explained that he has enjoyed every bit of the 10-year period he spent in Nigeria. The envoy said Nigeria and Tunisia have excellent relations dating back in history. The beneficial relations, he said, has been further strengthened in the past 5 years, during which many agreements were signed. While expressing gratitude for the support extended to him, Ambassador Jalil Trabelsi maintains that Tunisia will always support and promote Nigeria.
Turkey and Nigeria are working on ways to strengthen military ties that will be beneficial to both countries.
The Nigerian army is to collaborate with the Turkish military to further upscale the ongoing fight against terrorism in the northeast. This was a thrust of the courtesy visit of the Turkish ambassador to Nigeria, Hadiyet Bayraktar, to the Nigerian Army headquarters, Abuja. The ambassador notes that considering Turkey's several years of counterinsurgency operations, it will work with Nigeria to end the decade-long war in northeast. The two militaries promise to support each other in the areas of training and equipment.
That's a package this week. On behalf of the entire production team, I thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. My name is Justin Bemunyi.